Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Very excited to talk about our topic this week, which is security training for enterprises even. Something that I think John may have some experience with.
A little bit.
You've been
Little
teaching
bit.
and training for quite some time. I've spent much of my time as well in this arena and spoken to many people about training. How do you increase the level of security knowledge in an organization? And that, of course, differs per organization. But let's start with what's our goals for security training?
So I say this
can we
a lot.
Can we start with what's the problem we're trying to solve? Or
I say this a lot whenever people come to SANS classes, and it's kind of hard for people to understand. Is I ask the question, why are you here? And people will say, well, I am here because I want to learn about like current cutting edge hacker techniques and how to defend. I'm like, that's great. That's not why you're here.
Right.
Why are you here? And some people will say, because hackers are winning. I'm like, that sounds awesome, but that's not why you're here. Why are you here? And the vast majority of time, whenever you realize that the reason behind organizations opening up their pocketbooks and willing to write a check, not just for SANS training, but for the flight and for the hotel and everything, is because of some type of compliance standard. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right answer to have people at training, but it is the answer that we're kind of left with.
Well, that's interesting. And that, I've spoken to students too. They're like, well, I'm here because I have to be here. Because it's a compliance check mark that I go get training.
And there's a percentage of our people that come into our classes that are there because they have to be. And it's kind of our goal in life to make sure that they're super excited to be there eventually. And that's why, it's a little bit of background. I probably shouldn't be sharing all the shop talk, but at SANS, when I first started working for SANS, this is way back in like 2007, 2008 timeframe, Mason Brown, who's kind of the guy that runs SANS now, said, I want you to go out and find Ed Scotus, Eric Cole, Rob Lee, Mike Poore in every single major city. And that did not happen. It turns out that finding people that can actually make those people that are like kind of a little bit lackadaisical about being there, excited to be there. And that's a challenge, but it's also something that's really cool about SANS as well.
What's interesting is a better answer to what your goals are and reasons why. I mean, back in the day when I would take SANS training, I think there was at first, like I need to learn the security stuff, so I'm going to go get training. But then as I progressed, I'm like, the company I work for, we've identified this technology that solves this problem for us, and we're going to go implement it. And I need to go learn more about it, right? So, we're implementing Active Directory. So I'm going to go get Windows security training so that we can do it securely from the ground up so that we don't have all of these issues. And tying it back to an organization's goals, one, good for you, good for the organization, and good for you to get the budget for that, right? Like that helps you get budget when you can tie it back to we're implementing, way back in the day was voice over IP, right? Does SANS have voice over IP training, security training?
They did. It was actually originally written and created by Johannes.
Was it Johannes?
Johannes.
Okay.
And I think it ran a couple times and then died.
Yeah. I actually took that class because we were going to offer a service to help people secure their voice over IP, installations and that sort of thing. So tying it, that's probably a bad example of technology to tie it to, but aligning it with the goals in your organization speaks to your goals for training. Now, you may have personal career goals as well, and that's great. But for the organization, how do they keep employees, John, once they've got them trained up?
And that's actually what happened to me at Accenture. A little bit of backstory. So I went to Accenture, and I can't remember what I was making at Accenture, but I think it was like $35,000 a year. And they were like, well, we can't give you a raise, but we'll give you as much training as you could possibly get your hands on. So I got like my CISSP, GCIH, GCFW. And I think I got a Security Plus, but I'm not exactly sure because I think I was drunk at the time. But at any rate, I got a whole bunch of certifications, and all of a sudden Northrop Grumman was like, we're going to more than double your salary. And that was a no-brainer. And I think a lot of organizations are worried about training people and then having those people disappear.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, it really just comes down to employee wellness and happiness, which is probably a topic for another conversation. But in terms of like when we talk to organizations, John, like who should they train and why? Like, do you train network teams, sysadmin teams, users? Like, who should you train? Why should you train them? And how do you prioritize that?
And that's another really great thing that's going to get me into trouble. I think it's interesting that our penetration testing classes at SANS do as well as they do. Ed Scotus has just been a rock star for what, 15, 20
Hmm.
years now. I should say 30 and see what he says. He'll lose whatever hairs he has left. But
It's not
he's
many.
done a
I talked
fantastic
to him
job.
yesterday, the day before. It's not
He's
many. Yeah.
getting there. It's getting there. But we look at the what I consider to be the really important classes for computer security, for securing your environment. That would be like the Windows security class by
Mm,
Jason Fossen,
I agree.
505.
I agree.
But that class has been steadily going down in attendance for a long time
Oh,
because it's not sexy, it's
yeah.
not hot. But I'm starting to send all of my BHIS employees through it, not necessarily because it makes them better pen testers, which it does, but mainly that we can give much better recommendations to our
Right.
customers.
Right.
And there's a lot of things that we learn in his class with Jason, where we show the customer this and they're like, "Holy crap, we were about to spend $128,000 on something that Microsoft Active Directory did for free."
Mm-hmm.
And that's what people need to be doing. They need to be looking and they need to be toning their craft of Unix security, Windows security, scripting, understanding their networks. And while I appreciate them coming through pen testing and hacking classes, that's really where a lot of people need to go. And I think too many people are skipping those steps.
Yeah, I agree. It's the Defender classes, securing Windows, securing Unix, securing the network. That you those are the ones you should be sending your Windows admins, your Linux and Unix admins to that kind of training. I think that was my point of like who should you train and why. Is security is not done just in the security department. It's done throughout the organization. And while those Defender classes aren't as sexy, they're really important for raising the level of your administrators, which is going to overall boost your security level across your organization.
Yep. Yep. No, absolutely. You have another question here, Paul, that I
Yeah.
think is really, really good. I'm going to throw this one over to you. Should you train in specific vendor solutions, and which ones and why?
I think this is an interesting one. I think one reason why, and it's kind of funny, like if the vendor's going to give you the training and you've got a big project in that vendor solution and it's essentially free, it's probably not bad to take it because you're probably going to learn some stuff about not just the vendor solution but security in general. And if it's really low cost, that's great. Um, when it costs some money, you may be better off with some general security, but I don't know. I think it depends on the training. It depends on some of your career goals as well. Certainly, the larger, more widely deployed solutions like Cisco, that's probably good training to take.
Hmm.
But some of the other companies, smaller companies, maybe not so much. I don't know. I don't know if it's worth your time. What do you think?
Honestly, if your vendor, like if you have a massive firewall implementation like Palo Alto, or if you're implementing SourceFire, or if you can get Windows training on Active Directory, cool shenanigans like new tools like Microsoft Advanced Threat Analytics, take it. It's dirt cheap. It's really, really can be good. But I also think you should hold the vendor to a high standard. If they throw a complete chump in front of the classroom, you should kick and scream and try to get a
Hmm.
refund, because there's some great trainers out there. Just make sure that you're getting a good trainer. That's probably more important, I think, than anything. And granted, I am very biased in that regard, but having a good trainer and can really kind of bring that background and illuminate what you're discussing in such a way that it makes it applicable to your organization is really important. You just don't want somebody that knows slides and knows a handful of labs.
Well, and I also think, be very selective as to which vendor training that you go to. I mean, you may not have a choice, and you may just have to do it for the project. But if you do have a choice and it's something strategic for you, like I think I did some checkpoint training, but this was back in like 2001 or 2000. So, like, that training's completely useless now. I mean,
Yeah,
sure, I
yeah.
might have learned some stuff about TCP/IP, but I probably am much better off in like the SANS IDS class where I learned TCP/IP, and that stuff hasn't changed in the past 15 or 20 years. So
No,
all
it
that much.
really
I mean,
hasn't.
they introduced V6, but so realize that some vendor training is going to be very, very specific to the version that they're on, and there's a limited lifespan to that knowledge. And unless you're willing to put a continued investment, you might be better off in getting some more generalized training than the specific vendor training.
Yep. Yep. Now you got a question in here that I think we'd come across as complete chumps if we didn't try to answer it honestly.
Mm.
Other training outside of the SANS Institute. I mean, I'm a SANS junkie. I'm not even a junkie. I'm a freaking dealer. I'm a pusher. I'm an enabler
Well,
of
it
SANS
just
stuff.
for the audience's benefit, John and I have been involved with SANS since like the beginning of time. I think I did my first training in was it 99 or 2000? So,
It's right
uh,
around when we met, actually,
yeah,
shortly there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've been involved with SANS for a long time. A lot of our friends are SANS instructors. So, SANS has been a sponsor of our other show for a long time. So there's a relationship there.
Yep.
However, SANS isn't your only option. There are other trainings, and I'm not saying you always have to make the decision of like either or. It's kind of like listening to podcasts and a lot of other things. Like you're going to listen to more than one. You're going to go to more than one training class. So
But it's still gonna hurt Paul and I's feeling every time.
yeah,
Um,
no.
no, I'm joking.
So I think the premier like offensive training is from offensive security, correct?
I would say so. If you have to,
So OSCP,
how
OSCP, did I
how
say
can
that
I
right?
say this in such a way that's not going to get me into trouble? If you have to take
You're
just
you're
one
already
training
in
class,
trouble. You're already in
yeah,
trouble.
take SANS. But let's look at OSCP. I think it's a solid training program. We have people at BHIS that have that certification as well, and people just don't have anything bad to say about it. They
Hmm.
say it's a great class taught by great instructors, and that's good. And to be honest, if the people from OSCP are listening, in a lot of ways, you guys, you make us better. And it's something that Ed and I have talked about. It's
Hmm.
really cool to have a great competitor that has a good product that makes us have to strive to become better because we don't want to become stagnant. We don't want to become stale. So that would be one. Actually, I got to be completely blunt, Paul. That's about the only one I can think of that I would say, yep, go for it. They're a
Right.
great training company with a great product. I can't think of anything else. Like, what are we going to say? CEH?
I
No,
just haven't heard all good things about CEH.
I've
And I'm not
heard
saying not
nothing.
do it. I mean, our sponsor, IT Pro TV, has CEH training, and I mean, to just kind of give a little plug to our sponsor, right? Like, you can subscribe to a very reasonable yearly rate and get a whole bunch of on-demand training included with that, and CEH is in there. So, if you're gonna do that, why not, right? Like,
And I, and
go
I
through
and
it.
but if you look at IT Pro TV and kind of what they're doing, it's interesting. They're kind of like making a lot of the training for the masses, and it may not
Hmm.
be the sans quality that's out there, the absolute Cadillac, but there's a lot of people that just need those basic level skills, and I think that they're actually filling that void because there are guys, dude, we talk to all the time. They're like, look. I work at a credit union. My training budget is 50
Hmm.
cents a year. How am I going to be able to
Right.
do that? And
Well,
that's a
and
tough question.
that's where IT Pro TV fits, and they're also that kind of combination of like they're not live training, they're not necessarily virtual training, they're kind of like on demand, but with a lot of added benefits
Hmm.
to that, updated all the time.
Hmm.
So I think that that's a really good option for a lot of people, and I'm not saying that's the only thing you do, but it's something that you can have in your training toolkit. I know Cybrary just got some funding. I actually think Ron Gula was involved with some of the funding for Cybrary, a very similar kind of model for Cybrary as well. So those, I think, in today's day and age, with as many technologies as you need to learn, like having these extra training things is a good thing, and having
Hmm.
access to it is really really good. So, kind of along those lines, John. So other training for defenders. We talked about some of the like,
Dude, this is
you
this
know,
is dead simple. For training for defenders, go out and get the CIS benchmarks and read them.
mm,
Just go through each one and ask yourself, why are we making this configuration change? And the best thing you could do as defender is know your product. I hate to say RTFM, but yeah, as a defender, you really should RT the FM. Just because that's where, whenever I was doing defense years ago, and even as an attacker, if I'm attacking something, I go back, I go to those manuals, I try to figure out what the things are, and that's ultimately hacking, and that's ultimately security as well.
yeah, no, I agree. So, what's your thoughts on demand versus virtual versus live?
I can actually speak to this very, 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 very clearly. If you're taking a look at live training is very hard to get away from the instructor.
Mm.
It's very, very difficult to actually sit down and play Call of Duty in the middle of a live sans track class.
Not
If
that
you
it
take a
probably
look at
hasn't
the,
been done in your classes
not that it
before.
hasn't been done multiple times,
Hmm.
but if we look at on demand and virtual, give you kind of a little bit of a long history. 10 years ago, we had a huge problem with students actually finishing the on-demand and virtual level training. They would purchase it, they get about halfway through, and then they'd quit. They would just
Hmm.
kind of putter out, just never do it again. But lately, we've been spending a lot of time trying to tweak the on-demand package as much as possible and the virtual package so that people are actually completing. And in fact, we're getting the completion rate. I think it's up into the 80s now for
Nice.
percentage. But that was a lot of work.
Was that just
And
keeping it more engaging, or?
a lot of it had to do with make it feel like it was actually tooled specifically for the student.
Mhm.
So if you look at the production value of it, I now have like a blue screen behind me. I got a screen and I'm talking directly to an on-demand student, addressing the problems that an on-demand student would run into. Because what we discovered is if it's just a recording, a canned recording of a training class, by and large, people, if it's not something that's being talked to them directly and they can't really interact with it, they tend to zone it out a lot faster. But if I'm talking to the camera and I'm talking to you on demand student, all of a sudden it makes it more visceral and it makes it more relatable. And that's what we've had to do. So yeah, we've had to trade things up and
Yep.
really retool our instructors.
So the
for a lot of
level
places,
the
I've
level
done it.
of on-demand training matters, in other words.
Oh, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. And the amount of work that we put into it recently has been fairly phenomenal. I don't know if you remember that Twitter thing I said on demand trading, and there was a bar in the background, and we had a bunch of dead flies and stuff. We were in this. It was like a conference center, and they just had a wedding go through the night before, and wedding reception, and it just reeked of alcohol. There were flies everywhere. The bar was sitting right next to us off to our left-hand side. And it was awesome because the person that was leasing it to the on-demand team and myself from SADS, they were like, yeah, feel free to drink anything you want from the bar. It's pretty much open bar for people whenever they do this. So that's whenever I sent that tweet. I don't know how this relates to your question at all, Paul. I got on a sidetrack. I'm just saying on-demand is awesome because I get to get good and liquored up whenever I present to it. I don't know if that is
great.
quite what we need to be doing here.
Because wasted John Strand is more interesting.
Is an ass. Wasted John should be shackled up and thrown into the Mariana Trench and never seen again.
We try and keep wasted John Strand out of the spotlight.
Yep.
Oh, that's really funny. So we'll actually have an opportunity to bring on IT Pro TV for an interview on the show. We were actually just looking at the schedule earlier today. So they are scheduled to come on for an interview. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. They're great guys over there too. Tim and Don. So I think that's a good summary of security training for your enterprise. Lots of options out there. John and I talked about a lot of them. Of course, we're very heavily biased to SANS. And they produce fantastic training from fantastic instructors such as John. For all of your offensive countermeasures needs, don't forget to visit offensivecountermeasures.com. That's the company that John and I created to help solve at least some of your security problems. We think we do a pretty good job of it, so you should reach out to us.
We call our product Silver Bullet Panacea.
That's right.
So it works out really, really well.
So if you want one of those.
And also for proof, we've got an open source back end. Kicks things out to a text file and stuff. We can prove that we know what we're doing. So please check that out as well. Its name is Rita, Real Intelligence Threat Analytics, and it's named after my late mother. So check it out.
You can email sales@offensivecountermeasures.com if you'd like more information. That goes to like John and I and stuff. So it's a lot of fun.
And our kids.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. Well, thanks everyone for watching this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. See everyone next week.